The pioneers of the greenhouse effect. Before scientists could prove humans were changing the climate, they first had to understand how the atmosphere keeps the Earth warm. Joseph Fourier, the French mathematician, was the first to realize that the Earth's atmosphere acts like a blanket. He calculated that the Earth should be much colder than it actually is based on its distance from the sun, suggesting that the atmosphere traps heat. The first conceptualization of the greenhouse effect. Eunice Foote, a long overlooked American scientist and women's rights activist, Foote was the first to physically test the heat-trapping properties of gases. She placed cylinders of different gases in the sun and discovered that carbon dioxide trapped the most heat. She explicitly wrote that if the atmosphere contained a higher share of CO2, it would result in an increased temperature. John Tyndall. Working independently of Foote, the Irish physicist identified the specific infrared absorbing properties of gases. He proved that water vapor and CO2 are the primary gases responsible for the greenhouse effect, providing the rigorous laboratory data needed to back up the theory. Linking humans to warming. The transition from the atmosphere traps heat to humans are causing this happened in two major leaps. Svante Arrhenius, the Swedish chemist, was the first to quantify the impact of industrialization. He performed thousands of manual calculations to determine that doubling the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere could raise global temperatures by 5C to 6C, 6C. Interestingly, at the time, he thought this warming might be a good thing, as it would prevent a future ice age. Guy Stewart Callendar, an English steam engineer and amateur scientist, Callendar was the first to prove that the warming was already happening. He compiled weather records from the 19th and 20th centuries and showed that the Earth's temperature had risen alongside the increase in industrial fuel consumption. This became known as the Callendar effect, a modern proof. The final smoking gun came in the mid-20th century, moving the topic from a fringe theory to an international concern. Charles David Keeling. Keeling began taking precise daily measurements of atmospheric CO2 at the Mauna Loa Observatory in Hawaii. His data produced the famous Keeling curve, which provided undeniable visual proof that CO2 levels were rising steadily and relentlessly due to human activity. Summary of key discoveries. Scientist, year, contribution. Key insight. Eunice Foote, 1856. Experimental proof. Identified CO2 as a heat-trapping gas. John Tyndall, 1859. Infrared physics. Proved the mechanics of the greenhouse effect. Svante Arrhenius, 1896. First climate model. Linked fossil fuel burning to global temperature rise. Guy Callendar, 1938. Data correlation. Showed that Earth was already warming due to industry. Charles Keeling, 1958. The Keeling curve provided the definitive record of rising CO2. The consensus we have today is the result of these individuals layering evidence until the connection between human carbon emissions and global temperature rise became an established scientific fact.